This is the Page Publishing Book Club. How you doing? I'm your host, Alice Stockton Rossini. You know what? Everybody tells first-time authors to write what you know. And some people know things maybe you couldn't even imagine, not even on your radar. For instance, what's it like being an escort or running an escort service? Demetria Mars knows and shares all the things we need to know in her book entitled Safety in Seeing an Escort. Demetria, how many people admit they've even used an escort service, let alone that they are an escort?
Admit? Hardly any.
Right.
But the fact that it happens and it's very, very prevalent, no matter what the law decides to do about it. So, the safety aspect is just going to become even more important right now.
Well, what makes you an
So,
expert?
12 years of experience.
Being an escort.
Being an escort and dealing with a lot of clients and their horror stories.
So if you have an escort, are you having sex?
That's just one of those things that it's between the two people. If it's a consensual thing, it's a consensual thing. I mean, it's all about time. It's not really about acts or services that you get in a brothel, where it's legal. In the book, it tells you differences between, escorts, sugar babies, brothels, independent escorts. There's agencies.
Do people know the difference, do you think?
No. I worked in a brothel for 2.5 years and hardly saw any customers. Legal. And nobody bothers to come. It's kind of scary that they would all prefer to just take risks out there on the street. People get robbed, they get arrested, they get beat up, some people get killed. It's all about personal safety, not letting common sense fall out the window when your hormones get involved. So the biggest problem is everybody just loses control of their mouth when they start doing something like this, and that's what gets them in trouble with, law enforcement. And there's blackmailers out there. There's all kinds of issues that you have to protect yourself from. There's not so good people in this industry, and that's why the law is the way the law is in this country. Anywhere outside of a brothel is sex for money is illegal. And that's what the majority of people get arrested for, is because they open mouth, insert foot, say the wrong thing to the wrong person, and then money exchanges hands and you're busted.
Right.
So it's all about what you can and can't say to complete strangers on communication devices that, the government is definitely recording and using against you at all times,
Right.
at any given moment. We already know Facebook spies on people. So there's a lot of info in that book on legality of wording for things. There were places you could look for that stuff, and now with Sesta Fosta taking stuff down off the internet, it makes it harder for people to find the things they want to know without having to ask questions that can get them in trouble. There's new laws taking down advertising websites in the US, like Backpage, Craigslist. These new laws going into place are going to start governing what we can and can't say on the internet, monitoring people for certain words they say online. It's going to flag them. Where we have to go with our business is to make it more of a personal type of arrangement rather than the way it's been for billions of years.
So what compelled you to do this, to put yourself out there like this?
Okay, 12 years of being in this industry. I was arrested my first year into it. About a year into it, I started with an agency. Agency doesn't tell you anything about right from wrong, what you should and shouldn't say, what you can and can't do. You're on your own. On your own. They send you calls, you go out and do them. So, because I was naive, I was 20, didn't really know what the hell I was doing. I just went out and did it. And of course, eventually you get set up. So I learned my lesson. I learned what I did wrong. I learned what I should and shouldn't do and how things actually work legal-wise. And for me to have to turn away 75% of my callers made me feel like these people needed something to guide them. That bad stuff is just going to get a whole lot worse if they don't just control it with some laws and make consensual people not have any issues. You
Yeah.
know, license those people, license them, govern them like you do a brothel worker. You know, put laws around people that are consensual. They have to go into the police department, take a mug shot, sign away their life and their name and their email and their phone number and blah, 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 and say, I am legal. I have nobody working above me or below me. And then when you advertise your license number, your name, your phone, and everything matches their database. And you do your monthly medical testing. And the government knows you're clean, you're safe, you're doing everything right. And they go after the people that don't have matching information online. Those are the people doing something not right. You know, give us an option to do it the right way, and the majority of us would.
All right, Demetria, makes sense. Thank you. George Orville is an analytical chemist. He was hired by the FDA to analyze food and drugs that were sold, and some of his findings are alarming to say the least. George is retired and he's using an assumed name to protect his identity because a lot of people aren't going to like what he has to say. In his book entitled Chemical Warfare on America. So you fear for our safety, right, George?
Yes, it is, because my feeling is we are being poisoned through the air, water, and food. Predominantly fluoride, which was added to our water supply system way back in the 1950s. And the main purpose of it, which was proven by biochemist Charles Perkins, who went to Nazi Germany in the 1930s, where he was informed it was added to dumb down the population, make them docile so they could be controlled. And this is exactly what's happening in our country, as witnessed over the last 60 to 70 years. Look at what's happening nationwide, where we have so many people expressing so many dumb theories and whatever.
Dumb theories?
Oh, yes, because, you know, like going against Christianity, proposing some off-the-wall type of, propagating vaccinations, which are also derogatory. You know, it's quite a nasty thing, because it also affects our endocrine system, especially our thyroid gland, where it destroys the two hormones that control our metabolism. Now, our metabolism is very important in controlling our body weight. If you have a negative metabolic rate, that means you have a hard time putting on weight. But when you destroy the metabolic rate and it's highly on the positive side, then you gain a lot of weight. And it also affects the adrenal glands and the pancreas, which produce insulin. And that's why you have obese people, why you have an increase in obesity, you have an increase in diabetes. This is all almost like a planned attack on our population, is to destroy the country.
Who's behind it?
Well, you've heard of the deep state. Everybody is talking about the deep state on a political level, but you see, we have the deep state working on the so-called quiet level, which means you have to dumb down the population so they can accept. You have a whole bunch of what I call the mainstream news media that doesn't want to cover real good health cures, because if they do, then the pharmaceutical companies and the AMA and the health insurance people go after them to stop doing it, because they will withhold the advertising dollars from them.
So, I mean, these are pretty strong charges you're making here. I mean, this has already happened. I mean, obesity is at record highs, and you're saying the people that are behind it, are they eating different food? Are they...
Well, you take a look at Monsanto, which produces the genetically modified seeds, and the farmers have to buy the seeds every year from them. And if they save some of the seeds from the previous crop, there are lawsuits. But yet, what in their cafeteria, Monsanto is using the non-GMO food. So why is that?
You know that for a fact.
Yes, there's close to 700 lawsuits against Monsanto due to their production of glyphosate, which is a herbicide, but it also affects our reproductive system. Dr. Seralini did a study on the sperm count, and widely used over the past few decades, there was even reported that the fertility rates have decreased highly in the United States because you have so many different chemicals, okay? And I provided a lot of internet links where people, they don't have to take my word for it. They can access those internet links and make a decision for themselves.
All right, something to think about, George. Thank you. Lisa Pacino returns to Page Publishing. She is a very, very, very busy gastroenterologist, but somehow finds time to write fantasy. This is her second book in a trilogy. It's entitled Icebreaker. Inspire our listeners with how you manage to fit in being a doctor and an author.
I think you write what you know. So first thing in the morning, 5 to 6 in the morning, once you get your morning paperwork out of the way, you just let your creative juices flow. So that's what I did for a couple years, and then came up with a trilogy.
Okay.
And I was lucky enough to work with Page Publishing, and so this is book 2 of the trilogy.
All right, so bring me up to speed on this. What was the first book?
So the first book is called A Change in Tactics Maiden Voyage.
Okay.
And it tells about a young woman who wants to leave the comforts of home to look for adventure, find out if there's anything else out there in the universe. And so book 2, which is called Icebreaker, tells about basically breaking the ice, how she finds love, and does that make a difference in, her career and what she's going to do? Does it help that, there's a systemic enemy afoot? And so it puts new challenges for the main character. So science fiction is science. And if you like science and you build a story around scientific concepts, one of the things that kind of inspired me for where this venue was that a moon of Saturn called Enceladus was found with cryovolcanoes, and which is really cool because regular volcanoes that we have on Earth shoot out hot stuff, whereas cryovolcanoes shoot out cold stuff. So I thought that would be an interesting thing scientifically to bring into it. And then you can take any characters or any human story and you can drop them in anywhere. You can drop them in the present or past. I always give the example of Star Wars. When does Star Wars occur? And most people will tell you it occurs in the future. And I'll tell you it doesn't. It occurred in the past. Because the initial line is a long time ago in a galaxy far away, which I think is just beautiful. That what we do can occur anytime. And just because you have fancy stuff doesn't mean it occurred in the future. It could have been in the past just as well.
So where do we go on your third book?
So the third book is called Party Crasher, and it's in the editing process right now with Page Publishing. And it takes the step further to find out who actually is the enemy, and how do you deal with that, and how do you deal with loss, and how do you deal with trying to accomplish things, trying to make a difference in the world. So for me, it's very exciting, and I hope people enjoy it.
What's the moral of the story?
You can be whatever you want to be, and you don't have to be limited by where you are, as long as you keep your values and your spirit, and you have a good support system. You can basically accomplish anything.
Oh, man. What's your advice to aspiring writers who are listening to this show going, man, how does she do it?
Do it. You just have to pick a time and write a little bit every day. And if nothing else, everybody has a story to tell, I think, and just put it on paper. I tell people all the time, just put it on paper. And then once you've got it, Page Publishing is wonderful to work with. Just submit it to them and they'll look it over, and you'll get a unbiased professional opinion. And best of luck. It's great.
So you've had a great experience.
Absolutely. I had tried the traditional route where you try to get an agent, and there was, at least from my mind, a little bit of conflict of interest, but Page had no conflict of interest. They just wanted to help you. They wanted to give you a fair evaluation, and they didn't make you wait months. They said, we'll let you know within a week whether we think this is something we'd like to work with you on. And so it was great.
All right, Lisa, thank you for that. Listeners, I hope you're taking notes. In the meantime, we're going to take a very short break. This is the Page Publishing Book Club.
Attention all authors. Page Publishing is looking for authors. Have you written a book and want to get it published? Page Publishing will get your book into bookstores and for sale online at Amazon, Apple iTunes, and other outlets. They handle all aspects of the publishing process for you: printing, cover art, publicity, copyright, and editing. Call 800-204-6099 now for your free author submission kit. That's 800-204-6099 for your free author submission kit.
We're back on the Page Publishing Book Club. I'm your host, Alice Stockton Rossini. Kids get stomach aches, right? But John Boykin tells the story of how his daughter's tummy ache turned out to be cancer in his book entitled The Silent Storm, a story of hope, believe it or not. Now, John, your daughter went through a series of tests before they found out exactly what was causing the pain.
They did a CAT scan, and they were kind of shocked. Carrie had a tumor the size of a grapefruit on her left ovary. They performed the surgery. Most of the time, these types of tumors are not malignant. There's always a chance, you know. Well, in our case, it came back as malignant. And our next move would be to talk with an oncologist. And Carrie did real well. She did well with the chemotherapy. She was always upbeat, very positive. It didn't get her down, you know. And of course, we tried to stay strong for her, you know.
Right.
So they were doing a study on a new medication, and they asked her if she'd be interested in helping. And she said, well, sure. So they were doing a double-blind study on a new medication to help with increasing white blood cells. So she volunteered for that. And 9 months altogether. She had, you know, a chest tube in. That's where the chemotherapy went in, you know.
So she survived. I mean, she went into remission.
She's in remission.
How old is she? How old is she now?
She is going to be 25. This was when she was 9 years old. It was in 2002, 2003. August or September of 2003, she was officially diagnosed as being in remission, and I think that it was, you know, one of those things where she just took it in stride.
Yeah.
God bless her.
Yeah, so she lives a normal life now.
She's living a normal life right now, yes. She's currently working, and she's working in a catering service. And she's getting ready to start going to college at Kent State Stark University. But she's been very, very healthy ever since, thank God.
So why did you write this book now?
We had a doctor by the name of Dr. Rachel Levy, a psychologist. She recommended that I write a book, or at least write down things to get them off my mind that it would help. And I said, okay, so I did. Now, to write a book had been a dream of mine ever since I was little, but I never dreamt in a million years it would be a book like this.
The therapeutic benefits of writing. They're proven over and over and over again.
Right.
So, you know, good for you, John. I mean, it's
you.
obviously helped you.
What I've been doing is I have contacted Children's Hospital and a few other hospitals and, you know, talk about the book, do book signings, and they have another program where you can foster a family and the family can call you like anytime, day or night, when they're experiencing something.
Right.
And I'm going to get involved in that also. So it's my main goal was to have someone that's going through or has been through this with a child, and to let them know that they're not alone, and to let them know that it is okay. Cancer is not a death sentence like it was 50 years ago.
Right.
And, you know, just give them a message of hope.
Well, John, I think you've done that. Perfection afflicts everyone in Dan Ferguson's family, including his daughter. But as we all know, no one is perfect. So how do we alleviate the anxiety of constantly feeling like we're not good enough? This is the subject of Dan's book entitled Grace's Mirror. Now, you say everyone in your family has an issue with perfectionism. Where do you think that comes from?
Oh, a lot of places. My ancestors came over on the Mayflower, being Puritans. That might have something to do with it. but I think it goes back some generations, and we're finding our grandson, he's only 2, but he's got some of the same tendencies.
It's heartbreaking, isn't it? When you see them get so frustrated and you know that it doesn't have to be that way, that they're doing just fine and that it can't always be perfect.
Right. When our daughter was in first grade, she was in for 2 weeks, and she was pretty happy-go-lucky kind of kid, but she came home and she was all down this day and came in the back door, and her shoulders were slumped and she was looking down, and she took off her backpack and had about an inch thick stack of papers that she laid on the kitchen counter. And then she started crying and she said, "I don't deserve to watch TV today." So my wife and I leafed through the papers, and we found one mistake on one paper and one mistake on another paper. And I think she had expectations that she would go through first grade and maybe even all of school without making any mistakes.
So you're a doctor, correct?
Doctor in counseling, yes.
Okay, so you've had to deal with this before and you've decided now to write a book on it. How do you help people deal with this?
The best advice I've found is to lower your expectations. Dr. David Beck said that sometimes we're better off to aim at 80% instead of 100%. That's some of the best advice I've found. On the cover, there are 3 things in baggage, and those are the mirror of performance, appearance, and then forgiving ourselves. And so those are some things that are talked about in the book. And the idea is to find a mirror that will make the perfectionist happy. And the book begins kind of focusing on the psychological, but it builds up to focusing on the spiritual toward the end. And the last chapter is really about grace and learning to give ourselves some grace instead of expecting too much.
I think we could all use a little bit of that.
Yeah.
Since you're a counselor, do you talk about your book with your patients?
Oh, kind of interesting. I have a dental hygienist that had a good relationship with her over 10 years. And so one day we're kind of talking about it, and she talked a little bit about her sister being a perfectionist. And so I said to her, "Would you like to have a book?" And so she bought a book right there on the spot. And I do carry them with me in the car in case somebody does want a book. But I've done 5 book signings. I have another one coming up in Omaha, in Oklahoma City. I keep working on one in Wichita. And these are places where I have family close by, and so it kind of makes it convenient that I can call on these places and also see some of my family at the same time.
All right, Dan, not bad at all. Emily Ann Schreiner has a PhD in Psychological Foundations of Education, which explains the name of her first published book entitled Learning to Love and Loving to Learn. A director of Christian counseling for 20 years and head of the Addicted Disorder Department at a New Mexico hospital. And you tell me you talk about the typical problems that people run into every day. For instance,
well, sometimes people have trouble with discipline problems, or a recent problem that I've been asked to help someone with was with a child who was like 48 years old, and the parents didn't know what to do with the relationship because they had been having trouble for years and years. And so just to kind of give them some suggestions, and I don't like to get ahead too far, find out what's going on, and then when you try to do this, what happens then? But they're just typical kinds of problems that people have. PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and how to begin to correct them. Like PTSD can be from any trauma, from having been abused as a child. It can be from having been in a war zone. It can be many, many things, but it's when things keep popping up and coming up into their minds and cause them to almost have panic attacks. It has different symptoms. But how do you begin to work with those things? Sometimes I've had cases where someone has really felt guilty. They keep going back to the war zone. But in reality, as you start talking to them, it has been that they felt guilty about being in the war. And so when there was killing going on, they felt guilty and thought that they were to blame. So to work back through that, oftentimes people have to look back and look at things in a different perspective. Like if as a child you were abused and you're told you're a crummy person, then you keep that image in your memory bank. And so different things cue you. When someone starts talking to you, you might get a cue and you might feel like a lousy person. The emotion comes up.
Mm-hmm.
So to go back and look at that as an adult, looking at that situation and being able to say that person was wrong, what they said, that was not truth. And I need to deal with truth. So you're putting new things into your memory bank. Well, our emotions come from our memory bank. So we've edited that thought. And so the next time when we get a cue, hopefully that you might have to work on it quite a while, but eventually a new emotion will come up. I'm really an okay person.
So it's trial and error. It's like keep doing the same thing over and over again until it sinks in.
Yes. And people have patterns, too, that you have relationships with. They might always be putting you down or always be oversensitive. So then how do you deal with that so your responses change? And it might be just talking with the person and saying, this is how I feel when that happens.
Right. What makes your book stand out from others like?
Well, I think I always deal with a Christian perspective, a person who is a Christian and who really believes in God and wants to involve God in their life and every day as they're moving forward. They want to deepen that relationship with the Lord. And actually to sense the Holy Spirit that the Lord is really working with them. So it's really it's quite a Christian book as well. And so now I write. I no longer have an office. Now I write, and I have a TV program in Albuquerque that goes all over New Mexico. And we answer questions. Now I no longer charge for counseling. I do them as favors, or I answer questions on the air primarily. And so I try to have people have a better life for themselves overall, not only just to solve an immediate problem, but how are they growing in their faith and in their self-esteem, the way they look at things more accurately. Truth is so important, to look at things as they really are.
Looking at life as it really is. What a concept. Wow, we are out of time. Thank you so much for listening. If you missed anything, download us at 710WOR.com. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. See you next time.